Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we are returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about what makes each one good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go ahead and get started and see what we get today. So for our first pull, we got a Nocturnal Gauss Rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance, and hits have a chance to generate a stealth field. So the Gauss Rifle is one of the best semi-automatic weapons, rifleman weapons in the game. It hits very hard. The only real drawback is that to get the maximum benefit out of it, you do have to charge up each shot, but that's not really that big of a deal. It doesn't take that long, and it also can be fitted with a suppressor so that you can stay in stealth and give yourself plenty of time to do so, making it one of the best sniper weapons in the game. The Nocturnal effect on it is probably not the best effect for it. It's not the worst like it used to be, because it doesn't give the penalty to damage during the daytime, so at least during the daytime it's functioning like a non-legendary version and not worse than that. And then the bonus that you get at night is pretty significant, so if you're the type of player who remembers to switch weapons with day and night in the game, then that could be a very good effect for you. I'm not that sort of player, so it's much less valuable for me. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's excellent on a weapon like this, especially something like the Gauss Rifle, where it's firing slow but hitting hard per shot, and you really want every shot to hit. So getting that plus 50% VATS hit chance, not only is it going to help you land your hits, it's also going to allow you to target the weak points easier, and give you a little bit of extra range, because the bonus there will help to offset the accuracy penalties when you get past the range on the weapon cards. So you will still see some damage drop off past that range, but it's still better than nothing, at least in most cases. The third effect, hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, it's an interesting effect, but I don't know that it's really all that good. If you're trying to stay in stealth, and a weapon like this will definitely allow you to do that, as I mentioned earlier, then it can be beneficial, but I feel like you're much better off focusing on bonuses for your stealth on your armor. Either go unyielding with low health so that you get a ridiculously high agility for good stealth, or if you're going to go full health, go with a full set of chameleon armor, and that way you'll stay pretty much stealthy anytime that you stop moving while you're in stealth. You'll turn invisible and pretty much drop back into stealth. So that makes the third effect here really not that effective. If you're trying those two methods and it's not working for you, then this might help a little bit, but overall, the third star is pretty unexciting, so is the first star, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a quad harpoon gun with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the harpoon gun does sort of allow you to snipe with a heavy gun, which it makes it an interesting weapon, although it normally has a very low ammo capacity, typically 1, although I believe there's a mod that you can put on it to allow it to have a ammo capacity of 3. So the quad definitely increases that significantly, although I don't know that it really makes this weapon good, but the quad effect is never a terrible effect. I just don't know that it's doing enough to make this weapon the type of weapon you'd really want to use on a regular basis. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage, that is one of my favorite effects in the game. It's very good because VATS critical hits damage actually bypass endgame boss damage resistance, like the Scorch Beast Queen has 70% damage resistance right off the top to all incoming damage. The VATS criticals actually bypass that 70%, so getting an extra bonus to that damage is very powerful in those situations, and even against normal mobs, it's not a terrible thing to have. The faster movement speed while aiming, that is kind of a nothing effect in my opinion, just because if you're running Speed Demon, and I think most late game players will be running Speed Demon, then it's not doing anything at all for you. If you're not running Speed Demon, then it is doing what it says, but I don't think many players are running around the battlefield while aiming, holding down the aim button the whole time. So at best, it's situational bonus, but I suppose if you don't have the Speed Demon mutation, you could find some use out of it. But overall, this one, it's not a true dud, but it's also not exciting. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we have a Troubleshooter's Hellstorm missile launcher with plus 50% limb damage and plus 50 damage resistance while aiming. So the Troubleshooter's effect is one of the better Slayer's effects, just because there are regular times that you're going to be facing off with robots, such as whenever you're running a nuke silo, or facing the encrypted event, or even just in some daily ops. And also, robots are not particularly squishy, unlike a lot of the other types of enemies in the game, so getting some extra damage against them is pretty useful. The Hellstorm missile launcher is also an interesting weapon. It is actually, in my opinion, slightly superior to the basic missile launcher, even if it doesn't necessarily do quite the same damage per missile. But overall, you'll get, I believe it's 4 in the capacity, in the standard capacity, and that makes it much better in my opinion. But the plus 50% limb damage is really not doing much for it. You're going to get your best benefit from that on weapons that have a higher fire rate and low damage, so that you'll get a better chance to cripple them before they get to you, as you're having to put several rounds on them at least to put them down. The Hellstorm missile launcher, hopefully anyway, is putting things down in 1 or maybe 2 shots, so crippling isn't really the goal there. The goal is really to just put them down as quickly as possible, so the 50% limb damage is not helping with that. The plus 50 damage resistance while aiming, that's a bit more useful, just because a weapon like this you could certainly use in VATS, but if you do, then if you miss, then your missile's just going to kind of go off into nothingness, and you won't get any area damage from it. Whereas if you are aiming down the sights or hip firing and you miss, you'll still get some area damage from wherever it hits. So, you know, there's benefits and drawbacks to both. It's up to you which you think is better, you know, but the damage resistance while aiming will definitely make this weapon a little bit more appealing to aim down the sights, just so you can get that extra damage resistance. Although it's not really a whole lot. But anyway, this one's still pretty mediocre. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got an Aristocrat's Gatling Plasma, with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and plus 1 perception. So the Gatling Plasma is pretty much the premier weapon, the one that you see most players running around with in heavy armor. There's certainly some other weapon choices as well, but this is the one that you see, at least that I tend to see most frequently. The Aristocrat's effect is one of the best effects for full health builds. It's right up there with Junkies and Anti-Armor, and the Aristocrat's effect gives you up to plus 50% damage as long as your total caps that you have on the character are over 32,000, which late game, once you've bought all the plans and everything else you really care about from the train stations and the White Spring and all that, it's pretty easy to keep your cap total above 32,000. And even if you drop it below, you're still getting some benefit, just not as much until you get it back up to over 32,000. The VATS critical hit's doing plus 50% damage. As I mentioned before, it's one of my favorite effects, but this is really not the best weapon for it. The drawback with trying to use VATS with a Gatling Plasma is that it fires so quickly that you're going to just burn through your AP, and it doesn't have a particularly efficient AP cost. So you'll only get really a few seconds of firing on an enemy with a typical power armor build before you're out of AP. So that really limits the effectiveness of the VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage effect, because you're just not going to be able to get as many criticals in VATS, because you won't be able to fire in VATS as often because you'll be out of AP. The plus 1 perception, that does synergize very well with the second effect, and if you really were trying to use this weapon in VATS, then this could be a good weapon for that, or the good particular weapon. You know, the Gatling Plasma is still probably not your best choice for that. And the plus 1 perception is going to give you some more VATS accuracy, whereas it's really not going to do much else for you if you are not using this thing in VATS. So overall, this one is decent. Again, not great. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one and see what we get. And here we've got an Aristocrat Short Assault Rifle with plus 50% VATS hit chance, and hits having a chance to generate a stealth field. So I talked about the Aristocrat's effect before on just the last weapon. Again, it's one of the best effects in the game for full health builds. Unfortunately, the Assault Rifle is a little bit underpowered compared to other commanded weapons, such as the Handmade or the Fixer. But it still shouldn't be completely written off, just because if you spend any time using one of these, firing them, it fires very, very smooth, and it reloads very, very quickly. So the assault rifle does have some benefits, but I fully understand most players wanting to use the most damaging weapon. I do too. But even so, I could still see this one having some value. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's going to be very good on a weapon like this, because this is the type of weapon that you could really use in VATS pretty much all the time just to get some extra damage from targeting weak points and VATS critical damage. So the VATS hit chance is definitely going to help with that in all the way across the board. And then the hits having a chance to generate a stealth field, that's not really doing a whole lot for you, as I mentioned before, although this is the type of weapon that you could easily suppress, and it will serve you very well in stealth. So if you're having trouble staying in stealth, that third effect might help you, but really the third star is not particularly exciting, but the first two are pretty good, so I might actually put this one up on my vendor, see if anybody's interested in it and wants to play around with it. But let's go on ahead and see what we get for the next one. Alright everyone, I apologize. There was a brief issue with my recording and I lost the last 5 pulls that I did here, so I'm going to go ahead and do 5 more pulls and continue on. So for our next pull, we get a 2-shot snub-nosed 44 pistol with replenishing action points with each kill and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the 44 pistol is not a terrible weapon if you're a gunslinger build, but I don't see a lot of gunslinger builds running around because, frankly, the pistols in this game are underpowered, unfortunately. The 2-shot effect doesn't really help that too much. The 2-shot effect, it used to be much more powerful than it is. It used to be a full extra projectile with an extra 100% damage. That is no longer the case. That change happened a long, long time ago. Now it's plus 25% damage, but that damage is divided up evenly between the 2 projectiles, and additionally, the weapon takes a significant accuracy penalty because of the 2-shot effect. That means that, in my opinion, the 2-shot effect is not very exciting at all. The one time where there is an exception to that is with explosive weapons, whether you're talking an explosive launcher weapon like a missile launcher, or just a weapon with the 2nd star with the legendary effect of exploding bullets. But those weapons do benefit greatly from the 2-shot effect, but in most other cases, the 2-shot effect is just not exciting at all. The replenishing action points with each kill, that's a good effect, especially for a pistol, just because to make it effective, especially a gunslinger pistol like this, you're really going to need to be using VATS and getting VATS critical hits and targeting weak points to get enough damage to make it effective for you. So replenishing your action points every time you kill something, that's going to help you do that and keep you targeting weak points and VATS more frequently. The 250 damage resistance while reloading, that is not one of my favorite 3rd stars by any means, just because you start seeing diminishing returns on the amount of damage that the damage resistance stops once you get over about 300 to 400 on your damage resistance on your armor. So you'll still see some benefit from it, I'm not saying you won't, but the benefit that you'll see won't be as much as you might think it would be. And it's only working while you're reloading, which that's a good time for it to be working because you can't be shooting back at that time, but still, really not the best 3rd star. I'd much rather have faster reload speed than damage resistance while reloading, for example, but overall this one's pretty unexciting, so let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we got an Exterminator's Crusader pistol with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 250 damage resistance while reloading. So the Exterminator's effect is probably the worst, or at least tied for the worst, of the Slayer's effects, just because there's not really any time in the game that you really need to go hunt down Mirelurks and bugs on the regular. So it's just not doing a whole lot for you. Sure, Mirelurks can be kind of tough, especially Mirelurk queens, and so the extra damage against them can be useful, but in most cases, it's not worth keeping a weapon around specifically for that. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that's one of my favorite effects, and it just helps you keep you on target, getting more damage from those targeting weak points in VATS, and even increasing your range of the weapon just because it'll help offset the range penalty for the drop-off once you get past the range on the card. Once again, the 250 damage resistance while reloading, not one of my favorite third stars. Overall, the only good star on this weapon, in my opinion, is the second star, which makes this one pretty unexciting. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got a Troubleshooter's short ultrasight laser pistol with bashing damage increased by 50% and faster movement speed while aiming. So the Troubleshooter's effect is one of the more useful of the Slayer's effects just because you'll be fighting robots regularly, whether it's in the daily ops or in the nuke silos or even the encrypted event, and they're not the squishiest enemies around, so getting some extra damage against them is pretty useful, and in some cases it might be worth keeping a weapon around specifically for them. Unfortunately, if you're doing that, it's probably not going to be the short ultrasight laser pistol, which is actually worse than the short laser pistol. So, the second star, bashing damage increased by 50%. Well, bashing damage in this game is not exciting, so adding 50% to that bashing damage that's already very low is not really adding much. If this was a minigun with a shredder mod, it would be a lot more useful. It's not, so it's not. The faster movement speed while aiming, that is, again, not one of my favorite third stars, because if you're running the speed demon mutation, which I am, and I think most late game players will be, it's doing nothing at all. And if you're not, the question is, how much time are you really spending running around while you're moving and aiming simultaneously? My guess is, for most players, not much. So, once again, an unexciting weapon here. Let's go on ahead and try a couple more. And here we've got an Executioner's Pipe bolt-action pistol with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Executioner's effect is actually a good effect in the right situation. Unlike the other effects in the game, it is actually multiplicative, so when it says plus 50% damage, it's talking about whatever damage you see on the weapon card there, even if you have boosted that damage through perks or chems or whatever other method. Then that's a very powerful thing. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything at all until your target is below 40% health. So that means it's most useful against high fire speed, or with high fire rate, low damage weapons where you're going to have to put several shots on a target to put them down. This is basically a pipe pistol or pipe rifle, depending on how you mod it out, version of the hunting rifle. So this weapon does not fit that bill. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage. That's a great effect, bypassing the innate damage resistance of endgame bosses, and just useful all around for some extra damage, so no complaints there. And the 25% less VATS AP cost, that's a very good effect, probably my favorite third star overall, but this weapon doesn't really benefit from it as much as some weapons could, because it fires so slowly that if you've got a decent AP pool, then by the time you empty your clip, spend some time reloading, your AP is going to be back because you're not going to be firing so quickly that you're likely to just burn it out. So it's useful, but not as useful as it could be on an automatic weapon, where you're going to be burning through your AP more quickly just by holding down the trigger. Alright, let's go on ahead and try one more here. And here we've got a Nocturnal assault rifle with damage increases with bullets exploding for area damage and breaking 50% slower. So the Nocturnal effect, as I mentioned earlier, is not as bad as it used to be. It's good at night, the damage bonus is pretty significant, and during the day it basically functions like a non-legendary version, which is better than it used to be. It used to be that during the day it functioned worse than a non-legendary version. I'm not the type of player who will remember to switch weapons based on in-game day and night, but if you are, this could be a very useful weapon for you. The bullets exploding for area damage, that's one of the best second stars in the game. In some players' opinions, it is the best second star. It's just extra damage on your primary target, and if they've got enemies nearby, then they'll take some extra damage as well. So that's a good thing. And then the breaking 50% slower, it's not my favorite third star, but it is a very good third star because, let's face it, Who enjoys repairing their weapons? I don't think anyone does. I know I don't. I'm guessing you probably don't either. So having your weapon break 50% slower and have to do that half as often, no complaints on my end. There are better third stars, but overall, not a bad third star. So this one, not really exciting, not bad. I could see maybe a lower level player using it until they got something better, but really not exciting. So anyway, I appreciate you tuning in, and remember, if you enjoy content like this, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you anything. And until next time, I'll talk to you then.